The grill was still smoking when Pauline looked me dead in the eyes. 23 people at her backyard cookout, church friends, cousins, neighbors, and every one of them eating food I'd spent 6 hours preparing. She set down her lemonade, waited for the table to go quiet, and smiled. Honestly, Myra, if you vanished tomorrow, nobody would even miss you. The whole table laughed. Derek, Brenda, Uncle Ray, even the couple from church who barely knew my name. I looked down at my plate. Hot dog, yellow mustard, pickle relish on the side. I picked it up, took one slow bite, and looked straight at my mother-in-law. We'll see. Nobody registered what I said. The conversation drifted to someone's new truck. 48 hours later, every person at that table would understand exactly what I meant. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. I'm Myra, 32 years old, and for 3 years I was the woman who held my husband's family together while they treated me like I didn't exist. This is the story of how I vanished, and what happened when they realized I was the only thing keeping them standing. If you've ever been the invisible one at your own family's table, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. I grew up in a town so small you could miss it on a bathroom break. Garrison, Tennessee. One traffic light, one diner, one church with a leaking roof nobody ever fixed. My dad worked at the furniture factory 2 towns over. He died when I was 19. A forklift malfunction on a Tuesday afternoon. My mom lasted 6 more years before the cancer took her. I was 25, standing in a hospital hallway with a clipboard full of paperwork and nobody to call. No siblings, no aunts or uncles worth mentioning. Just me and a rented apartment with a kitchen table I ate at alone. I taught myself graphic design on a cracked laptop I bought at a pawn shop for $60. Free tutorials, free software. I made flyers for the Baptist church, menus for the diner, a logo for the hardware store. Charged $40 a job and thought I was doing well. Eventually, I scraped together enough for community college. 2 semesters of business fundamentals, just enough to learn how to invoice properly and file my own taxes. Then I met Derek Smallwood at the Polk County Fair. He was working the ring toss booth for the volunteer fire department. Big hands, easy smile. He brought me wildflowers the second time we went out. Not from a store, from the field behind his mother's house. He listened when I talked. He didn't interrupt. I thought I'd found the thing I'd been missing since my parents died. A family. Somewhere to belong. We married after a year. I packed everything I owned into 4 boxes and moved to Cedar Falls to be near his people. I thought I was gaining a family. Turns out, I was gaining an audience for my own humiliation. The Smallwood monthly cookout had been running 15 years by the time I showed up. First Saturday of every month, rain or shine, Pauline's backyard. The yard wasn't fancy. Chain-link fence, a propane grill Derek's dad bought before his accident, 2 folding tables covered in plastic tablecloths that Pauline replaced twice a year whether they needed it or not. 20 to 30 people showed up. Cousins, church friends, a few neighbors who came for the free food and stayed for the gossip. Here's what nobody talked about. I did everything. I picked up the meat from Ingram's butcher on Thursday. Friday night I marinated the ribs, mixed the potato salad, prepped the coleslaw dressing. Saturday morning I baked the cornbread, loaded the truck, drove to Pauline's, set up the tables, laid out the napkins and plates, and arranged the wildflower centerpiece I cut from the field out back. Pauline's contribution was sitting in her green lawn chair, greeting guests like a queen receiving subjects, and accepting every compliment as if she'd been standing over a stove since dawn. "Pauline, this potato salad is divine." "Well, thank you, Carol. Old family recipe." My recipe. My grandmother's recipe, actually. One of the few things I still had from my mother. But I never corrected her. I told myself it didn't matter. The food was good. People were happy. And correcting Pauline in her own backyard felt like poking a hornet's nest with a short stick. Derek never noticed. Or if he did, he kept it to himself. Same way he kept a lot of things to himself. The website practically runs itself. He told Uncle Ray once, talking about the auto shop's online presence. I built that website. I maintained it. I answered the inquiry emails. Derek didn't know the hosting password. Pauline Smallwood had earned her throne, and I'll give her that. 20 years ago, her husband Frank was driving home from a night shift when a deer came through the windshield on Route 9, shattered 2 vertebrae, spent 4 months in a hospital bed, and came home in a wheelchair he'd never fully leave. Derek was 14, Brenda was 8. Pauline had a mortgage, 2 kids, a disabled husband, and a high school diploma. She opened a home daycare the following month. For 14 years, she raised other people's children in her living room to keep the lights on in her own. She cooked, cleaned, changed diapers, filled out tax forms, and kept that family breathing when it had every reason to stop. She retired 3 years before I married Derek, and she deserved every bit of rest she got. The problem wasn't what Pauline had done. The problem was what Pauline couldn't stop being. She'd built her identity on sacrifice. She was the one who carried everything, the one who never asked for help, the one who held the family together when the world tried to pull it apart. And then I showed up. Young, professional, capable. Derek looked at me the way he used to look at her, like I had answers. Pauline didn't see a daughter-in-law. She saw a replacement. The first Thanksgiving I attended, I brought a pecan pie. Homemade. My mother's recipe. Pauline picked at one bite, said nothing, and served a store-bought pie from the Piggly Wiggly instead. When guests asked about dessert, she waved at the box. Derek's wife tried, bless her heart. The night before that Thanksgiving, Derek had gotten a phone call from Pauline. He'd been on the line for 20 minutes. When he hung up, he was tense. I asked what was wrong. Nothing, he said. Just Mom being Mom. Brenda was 28 and lived in Pauline's basement. She'd enrolled in cosmetology school the year before I married Derek, dropped out after 1 semester, and hadn't attempted anything since. She worked part-time at the Shell station on Route 12. Enough for cigarettes and gas. Not enough for rent. Pauline covered the rest. Brenda never said it directly, but you could feel it in the way she watched me work. The way her jaw tightened when Derek mentioned something I'd designed. She had the same hunger I'd had at 22, the kind that makes you stare at other people's lives and wonder why yours won't start. The difference was I'd done something about it. Brenda channeled hers into cruelty. She called me the help when I was in Pauline's kitchen, loud enough for me to hear, quiet enough to deny it later. She once, accidentally, knocked her open bottle of BBQ sauce onto my laptop bag. Giggled about it. Pauline smirked. Nobody apologized. Then there was Uncle Ray, Pauline's older brother. 65, retired from the plastics factory in Murfreesboro, widowed 3 years ago. The cookout was the only social event he had left. He kept his seat at the table the same way Brenda kept hers, by performing. "You sure can make a plate, girl," he told me once, loud enough for the whole yard. "Shame that's all you're good for." Everyone laughed. He meant it to be funny. Maybe it was, to them. Pauline leaned back and smiled. It was Thanksgiving year 2 when she said it the clearest. A few glasses of wine in, the dishes not yet cleared. She looked at me from across the table and said, almost under her breath, "You were always just a guest in this family." Derek heard it. I know he did. He reached for the gravy. Derek never called me a name, never raised his voice, never told me I wasn't welcome. His weapon was quieter than that. Every time Pauline said something sharp, I'd look at Derek. And every time, he'd look away. Or laugh. This weak, half-hearted laugh that sounded like air leaking from a tire. "She doesn't mean it," he'd say later in the truck on the way home. "That's just how Mom talks." I confronted him 3 times over 3 years. Each time was the same. I'd lay it out. The comments, the credit stealing, the way Brenda called me the help. And Derek would nod slowly, like a man hearing a diagnosis he already suspected. "You're right," he'd say. "I'll talk to Mom." He never did. The 3rd time, I told him I wanted to skip the next cookout. He got quiet. Then he said, "Mom raised me alone after Dad's accident. She gave up everything. She needs her family around her, Myra. Please, just for me. I went. I always went. It took me too long to understand what Derek was doing. He wasn't neutral. There's no neutral when your wife is being insulted at your mother's table and you reach for the gravy instead of a spine. Silence is a side. Derek chose his every single month. He wasn't cruel the way Pauline was cruel. He was something worse. He was comfortable. He'd grown up under Pauline's rules. He'd learned early that agreeing with her meant peace, and disagreeing meant becoming the next target. So he agreed. He agreed when she mocked my pie. He agreed when Brenda spilled sauce on my bag. He agreed when Pauline told me I was just a guest. He agreed by saying nothing, and nothing is exactly what I got from him when I needed everything. I stayed for 3 years. People ask why. The answer isn't simple, and it isn't flattering. Start with the practical. Our names were both on the mortgage. I'd built my freelance client base in Cedar Falls, the diner, the hardware store, the church, a veterinary clinic in the next town. My social network was the church community, and leaving meant walking away from the only people who said hello to me at the grocery store. Then there was the thing I couldn't say out loud. My parents were dead. My grandparents were dead. I had no siblings, no cousins I'd spoken to since I was 12. The Smallwoods, dysfunctional, dismissive, sometimes openly hostile, were the only family I had left. Walking away meant walking into nothing. And I'll admit something else. Over-responsibility was my blind spot. I managed the cookout logistics because nobody else would. I did the shop's books because Derek couldn't keep a spreadsheet straight. I helped Brenda format her resume twice. I drove Uncle Ray to his cardiologist appointments when Pauline said she was too busy. I told myself I was needed, and that felt close enough to being wanted. But I wasn't stupid. 3 months into my marriage, I'd opened a savings account in my name only, a separate bank. I put $100 in every week and didn't tell Derek. By the July cookout, the one with the hot dog, I had $14,200 in that account. I'd also searched apartment listings in Asheville, North Carolina, 3 times. I knew the median rent for a studio. I knew which neighborhoods had the best coffee shops and print shops and small galleries. I was building an exit plan the way I built everything else. Quietly, competently, alone. What I didn't have was a reason sharp enough to pull the trigger. Then Pauline gave me one. The July cookout. I started prepping at 7 in the morning, marinated the ribs overnight, mixed the potato salad from memory, my grandmother's recipe, the one Pauline claimed as hers. Baked 2 pans of cornbread. Loaded everything into the truck bed, drove to Pauline's, set up the tables, clipped the tablecloths against the wind, and arranged the mason jar centerpieces while Pauline watched from her lawn chair with a glass of sweet tea. "You missed a spot on that table," she said. I wiped it. 23 people showed up. Ribs came off the grill beautifully. The potato salad disappeared in 30 minutes. Uncle Ray loaded his plate 3 times. Carol from church told Pauline the cornbread was the best she'd ever had. Pauline said, "Well, I added a touch of honey this year." I didn't correct her. I poured myself a lemonade and sat at the end of the table. Then the conversation turned to family. Someone mentioned a cousin's new baby. Pauline leaned forward, glass in hand, voice pitched for the whole yard. "Family is everything. Blood is everything." She looked directly at me. The table went quiet for half a second. That particular quiet that happens when everyone knows something is about to land. "Honestly, Myra, if you vanished tomorrow, nobody would even miss you." The laugh came from everywhere. Derek, a short, breathy thing. Brenda, loud and sharp. Uncle Ray, deep and rolling, like he'd been waiting for the punchline all afternoon. Neighbors, cousins, even the couple from church who'd just eaten my cornbread. I looked at my plate. Hot dog. Mustard. Relish. I picked it up. Took one slow bite. Looked at Pauline. "We'll see." She blinked. Then someone said something about the Titans preseason and the table moved on. Nobody looked at me again. They didn't need to. I'd already decided. "You know that feeling? When everyone's laughing and you realize the joke is you? When you've poured everything into a family that sees you as furniture? If you've ever sat at a table where you did all the cooking but got none of the credit, drop a comment below. Tell me I'm not the only one. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. Because what I did next, they never saw it coming. We drove home in silence. Derek turned on the radio. Country station. Something about a tailgate and a girl. He hummed along. By 10 o'clock he was asleep on the couch with the remote on his chest and a beer going flat on the end table. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him breathe. 3 years. 3 years of she doesn't mean it. 3 years of potato salad credit and BBQ sauce on my laptop bag, and being told I was just a guest in a family I'd been feeding, funding, and holding together with both hands. I moved quietly. 1 suitcase, laptop, chargers, my passport, birth certificate, the savings account printout, a week's worth of clothes, the framed photo of my mother from the nightstand, the one where she's laughing at something my dad said, her head thrown back, her hand on his arm. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to the salt shaker. I didn't write a note. There was nothing left to explain to someone who'd spent 3 years not listening. At 2 in the morning, I pulled out of the driveway with the headlights off until I reached the main road. At the gas station on Route 9, I parked under the fluorescent lights and blocked every Smallwood number in my phone. Derek, Pauline, Brenda, Uncle Ray. Every cousin, every church contact who'd laughed at that table. Then I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. Eyes dry, jaw set. I said it out loud, just to hear it. We'll see. The road south was empty. I turned the radio to something without words and drove until Cedar Falls was nothing but a name on a sign I'd already passed. The motel outside Knoxville smelled like carpet cleaner and someone else's cigarettes. I sat on the edge of the bed at 6 in the morning with my suitcase unopened and my laptop balanced on my knees, and the full weight of what I'd done landed on me like a bag of gravel. No family, no husband, no in-laws who'd call to check on me, though that last one was more relief than loss. I had a suitcase, a laptop, and a savings account that would stretch 3 months if I didn't do anything stupid. I cried. Hard, ugly crying. The kind I hadn't done since the hospital hallway where I'd signed my mother's discharge to hospice paperwork alone. But I wasn't crying about Pauline. I was crying about my mom. About the fact that she would have grabbed me by the shoulders at year 1 and said, "Baby girl, you get in that truck and you drive." She would have been right. I should have listened to the ghost of her sooner. When the crying stopped, I washed my face, opened my laptop, and got to work. Savings account, $14,200. Enough for first and last month's rent plus 3 months of expenses if I ate simply and didn't buy anything I didn't need. I searched Asheville rentals. The same listings I'd browsed 3 times before. There was a studio above a print shop on Haywood Street, available immediately. $700 a month, utilities included. I emailed the landlord. Then I opened the Tennessee court's website and filed a divorce petition. Uncontested. No children. No shared business. The form took 40 minutes. My first freelance email came in at 8:15. A regular client in Cedar Falls needed a logo revision for their fall menu. I finished it in 2 hours, invoiced $75, and closed the laptop. Still working. Still standing. 2 weeks later, I was standing in a studio apartment on Haywood Street in Asheville, North Carolina, holding a coffee mug with nothing else in the room except a folding table, a chair from Goodwill, and a view of the Blue Ridge Mountains through a window that actually opened. The space was 400 square feet. It smelled like ink and old paper from the print shop downstairs. The floors were scratched hardwood. The radiator clanked when it kicked on. I loved it immediately. The print shop owner was a woman named Gwen, mid-50s, divorced, silver hair cut short, reading glasses permanently pushed up on her forehead, and a voice like she'd been giving directions her whole life and expected people to follow them. She ran the shop alone, offset printing, business cards, event programs, the kind of work that big chains couldn't do with a personal touch. The first morning, she was pulling a tray of freshly printed wedding invitations when I came down to get coffee. She looked me over. Suitcase-sized bags under my eyes, wrinkled shirt, laptop clutched like a life raft. "Morning," she said. "You the new tenant?" "Yes, ma'am." "Gwen, you drink coffee?" "Yes, ma'am." "Stop calling me ma'am. There's a pot in the back. Help yourself." That was it. No interrogation, no pity, no asking where I'd come from or why I looked like I'd driven through the night. Just coffee and a door left open. I spent that first month reaching out to every small business in walking distance, restaurants, galleries, a craft brewery with a logo that looked like it was made in a middle schooler's computer class. I offered branding packages at rates I could barely afford to charge. 2 clients signed by the end of the month. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Jolene texted me on a Tuesday afternoon. Jolene Whitfield, the head librarian at the Cedar Falls Public Library, and the one person in town who'd never been to a Smallwood cookout. She wasn't in the orbit. She was just someone who'd stamped my book returns and eventually started recommending novels she thought I'd like. I hadn't blocked her because she'd never given me a reason to. "Derek came to the library today," she wrote. "Asked if I knew where you were. He looked rough, hasn't shaved, hasn't slept, from the looks of it." I stared at the message for a long time before I typed back. "What did you tell him?" "That I didn't know, because I don't. Not officially." Then she sent a longer message. "The shop website went down last week. Nobody knows the hosting login. Derek's been calling the internet company trying to get it restored, but they keep telling him he needs the account holder's email, which is yours." I didn't respond to that one. A minute later, the August cookout happened, or tried to. Pauline attempted everything herself, burned the chicken to charcoal. The potato salad tasted like it was made by someone who'd read a recipe once and gave up halfway through. Only 12 people came. Uncle Ray said the ribs were dry. I read it twice. I expected to feel something. Satisfaction, maybe. Or guilt. What I felt was quieter. A kind of tired recognition, like watching someone trip over the same crack in the sidewalk you'd been stepping over for 3 years. "Also," Jolene added, "Pauline's telling the church you had a breakdown, that you left because of mental health issues." I typed back, "Let her." One more text from Jolene. "Derek moved back in with Pauline. He couldn't keep up the house alone, mortgage payments." I closed the app, poured myself coffee, went back to work. Month 3. The boutique hotel on Charlotte Street called. Margaret Owens, the owner, 68 years old, former school principal, retired into hospitality the way some women retire into gardening, had seen my business card pinned to the bulletin board at Gwen's print shop. She needed a full rebrand: logo, website, signage, room key cards, breakfast menu design. She had a budget of $4,500 and a vision she couldn't articulate beyond warm but sophisticated, like a good bourbon. I spent 2 weeks on the pitch. 3 concept boards, font pairings, color stories pulled from the mountains outside her lobby windows. I presented them at her dining table on a Thursday morning while she served me coffee in a cup with a chipped handle. She studied the boards in silence for a full minute. Then she looked up and said, "Honey, this is exactly what I imagined but couldn't put into words. Where have you been hiding?" I almost laughed. Hiding was exactly what I'd been doing. Gwen printed the proofs for the final presentation. We'd started having coffee together most mornings by then. Nothing formal, just 2 women who worked alone finding it easier to work near someone else. "You're running from something," Gwen said one morning, sliding a stack of printed menus across the counter. I picked them up, fanned through them, checked the color registration. "I'm running towards something," I said. "There's a difference." She gave me a look that said she didn't entirely believe me but respected me enough not to push. Margaret sent a handwritten thank you card when the rebrand launched. I pinned it to my studio wall. First thing on a surface that had been bare since I moved in. Then I sat at my desk and thought about the one thing I'd been avoiding. My mother's box. The keepsakes I'd left in the Smallwood attic. I needed them back. I asked Jolene to pick up the box. She drove to Pauline's house on a Saturday when she knew Derek would be at the shop. Pauline answered the door, handed it over without a word, and closed the door before Jolene reached the porch steps. Jolene shipped it priority mail. It arrived on a Wednesday. I sat on the floor of my studio with the box between my knees and peeled the tape slowly, the way you open something when you already know it might hurt. My mother's things. The last physical pieces of a woman who'd loved me without conditions and died before I could return the favor in full. The silver bracelet was gone, the one my father had given her on their wedding day. Thin, simple, engraved with their initials on the inside clasp. Gone. Her handwritten recipe cards were gone. Decades of Sunday dinners in her slanted cursive. Cornbread, sweet potato casserole, peach cobbler, the potato salad Pauline had been taking credit for. All of it gone. The framed photo of my parents' wedding, my father in a rented suit, my mother in a dress her sister had sewn. Gone. In their place, sitting on top of a folded dish towel that still smelled like Pauline's laundry detergent, was a yellow sticky note. Pauline's handwriting, block letters, pressed hard enough to dent the paper. You never deserved these. I sat on that floor for a long time. I didn't call anyone. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I picked up the sticky note, carried it to my desk, and put it in the top drawer. In case I ever need to remember why I left. I said to nobody. The bracelet, the recipes, the photo. They were gone. Pauline had taken them to hurt me, and she'd succeeded. But she'd also given me something she didn't intend to. She'd given me certainty. I wasn't running anymore. I was gone. Margaret Owens referred me to the Asheville Regional Arts Council. The director, a man named Wallace Pryor, mid-60s, bow ties, the kind of polite that comes from genuinely caring about people rather than performing it, needed a designer for their annual autumn gala. Invitations, programs, venue signage, social media graphics, a full visual identity for the event. The contract was $8,000. More than I'd earned in any single month of my career. I pitched it like my life depended on it, because in some ways it did. Wallace called me 2 days later. Ms. Harper, he said, I'd started using my maiden name professionally. We'd like to go with your concept. The committee was unanimous. I hung up, sat in my chair, and pressed my palms flat on my desk until my hands stopped shaking. That week, I signed a lease on a proper studio, a small storefront 2 blocks from Gwen's print shop. 500 square feet with a plate glass window and a door that locked. I painted the walls warm white, hung my portfolio prints, and ordered a sign for the window, Harper Creative. Gwen helped me install it. She stepped back, tilted her head, and read it aloud. Harper Creative. That's got a ring to it. It's my mother's name, I said. Felt right. She handed me a bottle of champagne, the cheap kind with a plastic cork, and we drank it out of coffee mugs on the sidewalk while the sun went down behind the mountains. For the first time in longer than I could measure, I felt like I was standing in a place that was shaped around me rather than against me. My mother's name on the window, my work on the walls, my hands steady. Jolene's updates arrived like dispatches from a slow-motion collapse. The auto shop website was still down 4 months after I left. Derek had hired a freelancer from an online marketplace, $2,000 for a template site that crashed every time someone tried to book an appointment. 3 of his regular clients took their trucks to the chain shop in Murfreesboro instead. Pauline tried to restore the September cookout to its former glory. She'd spent the whole day cooking. Bought the ribs herself, marinated them the way she'd seen me do it, or thought she had. 8 people showed up. The potato salad was gluey. The cornbread was dry. Brenda brought store-bought coleslaw, and Pauline told her it was lazy, and they argued in the kitchen loud enough for Uncle Ray to hear from the backyard. Ray sat in his lawn chair and told Derek, "You need to go get your wife back before this whole family falls apart." Derek stared at his plate. "She won't answer my calls." "Then drive up there. I don't know where she is." That part was still true. Jolene hadn't told anyone where I'd gone, and I hadn't left a trail. The divorce papers arrived at Pauline's house by certified mail in early October. Tennessee law required service at the last known address. Derek had to sign for them. According to Jolene, he sat on the front porch for an hour afterward, holding the envelope. Then he went inside and called Jolene from the kitchen phone while Pauline watched from the hallway. "She actually filed," he said. Jolene told me. His voice cracked on the word filed. I read the text, closed my phone, and went back to designing the gala invitation proof. The border was a deep mountain blue. I liked how it looked against the cream stock. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up because I was expecting a call back from a print vendor. "Myra, hey, it's Bren." The voice hit me like cold water. Brenda. She must have borrowed a friend's phone. "Bren," I said. Flat. Neutral. Nothing she could use. "Listen, I know things got weird, but we really do miss you at cookout. Derek's a mess. Mom's not sleeping. It's been rough on everybody." I let the silence stretch. "Is Pauline apologizing?" Brenda paused. "Apologize for what?" "It was a joke, Myra. Everybody laughed. You're the one who made it into a whole thing. Then there's nothing to discuss." I ended the call and blocked the number before I set the phone down. 17 minutes later, a text came from a different number. Brenda again. "You're ruining this family. Derek's drinking. Mom can't sleep. Uncle Ray's blood pressure is through the roof. You happy now? Is this what you wanted?" I read it twice. Took a screenshot. Then I took a screenshot of the contact info and the timestamp. Blocked that number too. Another text came in 3 minutes later. A third number. "I hope you know you're going to regret this. You think you're better than us? You're nobody. You were always nobody." Screenshot. Block. I opened a folder on my laptop labeled "Do Not Engage." I'd created it the week I left. A habit from years of managing client correspondence. Keep records. Document everything. Don't respond with emotion. I dropped all 3 screenshots into the folder, closed it, and went back to the gala signage proofs. The venue had requested the font size bumped up 2 points on the welcome banner. I adjusted it. Saved the file. Sent the revision. Brenda's messages sat in a folder I planned to never open again unless I had to. By month 7, the gala branding was finished. I'd spent 3 weeks on the final round, refining the typography, adjusting the color palette until it matched the mountain light I'd been watching from my studio window every morning. Wallace reviewed the proofs at his office and called me that afternoon. "Myra," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, "you've given us something we can be proud of." I had 6 regular clients by then: the hotel, a restaurant on Biltmore Avenue, a pottery studio, a nonprofit that taught art classes to at-risk youth, a real estate agent, a coffee roaster who wanted labels that looked hand-drawn. My income had quietly passed what I'd been earning in Cedar Falls, though past was relative. I wasn't wealthy. I was steady. Rent paid on time, groceries without checking the account balance first. Gwen and I had dinner together most Wednesdays. Nothing fancy, usually the Thai place on Lexington or takeout eaten at her print shop counter after closing. She never asked about Cedar Falls. She'd figured out the shape of what had happened and decided the details were mine to share if I wanted. I'd started meeting other small business owners in the neighborhood, a woman who ran a candle shop, a retired teacher who sold watercolors at the Saturday market. People who introduced themselves by what they made, not who they were related to. Community built on something other than blood obligation. I thought about the sticky note sometimes. "You never deserved these." I thought about Pauline's voice at the cookout. "Nobody would even miss you." They were right about one thing. I didn't miss them. Not the cookouts. Not the forced laughter. Not the table where I did the cooking and someone else took the bow. Derek had signed the divorce papers without contesting. It was almost final. 7 months. That's how long it took to go from a hot dog at Pauline's cookout to a studio with my mother's name on the door. 7 months of early mornings, late invoices, and learning what it feels like to eat dinner without dreading what someone's about to say. If you've ever rebuilt something from nothing, a career, a life, your own self-respect, tell me about it in the comments, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. By month 9, 2 lives had gone in opposite directions, and you didn't need a chart to see it. Mine, a studio with a window sign, a portfolio website that ranked on the first page of Google for Asheville graphic designer, and a small feature in the Asheville Citizen-Times local business spotlight column. The reporter, a young woman named Kyra, had photographed me at my desk with the mountains visible through the window behind me. The caption read, "Myra Harper of Harper Creative, designing a new chapter." I'd taped the clipping to my studio wall next to Margaret's thank you card. Cedar Falls. Derek had moved into Pauline's house permanently. The house we'd shared, the one with both our names on the mortgage, had gone into default when I stopped paying my half and Derek couldn't cover the difference on a mechanic's salary. It sold at a loss. Smallwood Auto cut its hours from 6 days to 4 because Derek couldn't manage the workload without the back office support I'd been providing. The inquiry emails went unanswered. The books were a mess. Brenda had been fired from the Shell station for 3 consecutive no-call no-shows. She was crashing at a friend's apartment and hadn't spoken to Pauline in weeks. Uncle Ray stopped coming to the cookouts. There wasn't much to come to anymore. According to Jolene, he told Pauline, the food's bad and the company's worse. Jolene summarized it in one text. Pauline's house feels like a funeral home. Everyone's still there, but nobody's talking. I read the message on a Saturday morning while eating breakfast at the cafe around the corner from my studio. I closed my phone, finished my eggs, and walked to work. I had a label design due for the coffee roaster by Monday. The beans were called Second Wind. I appreciated the irony. Derek found me through the newspaper article. The Citizen-Times had mentioned Harper Creative on Haywood Street. He drove 3.5 hours from Cedar Falls and showed up at my studio door on a Thursday afternoon without calling. I was at my desk reviewing proofs when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up. For a second I didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight. The wrong kind. The kind that hollows out your cheeks and makes your clothes hang like they belong to someone else. His hair was longer. His hands, the ones that used to bring me wildflowers, were shoved deep in his pockets like he didn't trust them. Myra. Derek. We stood there. I didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. Mom was wrong, he said. What she said at the cookout, it was wrong. I should have told her that night. I should have told her a long time ago. I waited. He looked at the floor, then back at me. Come home. We can work this out. I'll talk to Mom. I'll actually do it this time. I studied his face. The boy from the county fair was still in there somewhere, buried under exhaustion, under 3.5 hours of highway, under a year of consequences he hadn't expected. This time? I said. It took me vanishing for you to find your voice. And you're still saying come home, like the problem is that I left, not that she said it. He opened his mouth. I need to tell you something. I need to tell you something first. I walked to my desk, opened the top drawer, the one with the sticky note, and pulled out a manila envelope. The finalized divorce papers, signed by both of us, processed, done. I held them out. He looked at the envelope like it was a living thing. Then he took it. I'm sorry, Myra. I know. He stood there another moment. Then he turned and walked out. The bell chimed behind him. I closed the drawer. Derek must have told Pauline about the papers the moment he got home, because my studio phone rang at 9 the next morning. A number I didn't recognize. Pauline had figured out the landline I'd listed publicly for client inquiries. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 3 minutes long. Pauline's voice started tight, controlled, the way it sounded when she was giving instructions to the daycare kids. Then it cracked open like a dam. You think you can just leave? Walk away from my family? From my son? You think you're somebody now because you've got some little shop in some city nobody's ever heard of? Let me tell you something, Myra. You were always just a guest in this family. You were never one of us. You were never going to be one of us. And Derek is better off. Better off. Without you dragging him down with your sad little freelance hobby and your sad little dead mothers. The message cut off. Voicemail limit. I sat in my chair and listened to the silence that followed. I played it back once more. not to hurt myself. I'd passed that threshold months ago. I played it to hear the thing Pauline couldn't hear in her own voice: panic. The matriarch was losing her grip, and the harder she squeezed, the more slipped through her fingers. I saved the voicemail, dropped it into the Do Not Engage folder. I didn't call back. The phrase stuck with me, though. "You were always just a guest in this family." She'd said it at Thanksgiving year too. She'd said it again now, screaming into a machine. Same words, same woman. But she was wrong about one thing. Guests don't do the dishes. Guests don't prep the food. Guests don't manage the books. And guests, when they've had enough, are absolutely allowed to leave. The truth about the Smallwoods didn't surface because I told my side. It surfaced because I didn't have to. Cedar Falls was a small town. People noticed things. They noticed that the cookouts had gone from 25 guests to 8 to none. They noticed that Derek looked like he'd aged 5 years in one. They noticed that Pauline had stopped volunteering at the church bake sale and the Christmas bazaar, events she'd run for a decade. And they noticed that the one person who'd always been in the background of every Smallwood gathering, setting up tables, carrying trays, cleaning up afterward, was gone. Carol Morrison and Diane Pruitt, two women who'd sat at Pauline's table and eaten my potato salad for years, reached out to Jolene independently. "We'd like to talk to Myra," Carol said. "We saw how Pauline treated her. We should have said something. We didn't, and we're ashamed of that." Jolene passed along their numbers. I didn't call right away. A week later, I texted Carol a simple message. "Thank you. That means more than you know." She responded, "We're praying for you, honey," and we stopped going to Pauline's. Didn't feel right once we admitted what we'd watched happen. The Smallwood reputation didn't collapse in a single moment. There was no dramatic scene, no public reckoning. It was quieter than that. The slow, irreversible erosion of a foundation that had been cracking for years. Fewer people at church spoke to Pauline after services. Fewer neighbors brought casseroles when Uncle Ray went to the hospital. The narrative Pauline had been telling. Myra had a breakdown. Myra abandoned us. Poor Derek. Started to lose traction the more people compared it to what they'd seen with their own eyes. I didn't orchestrate any of it. Truth doesn't need a campaign when the evidence has been sitting on display for 3 years. Brenda and Pauline finally turned on each other. It was inevitable. Two people who'd bonded over a shared target don't have much left when the target removes herself from range. Jolene heard the details from a cashier at the Dollar General who lived on Pauline's street. Brenda had been staying in the room Derek and I used to share. The one with the window that overlooked the backyard and the dormant grill. She and Pauline had been arguing for weeks. Brenda wanted to use the kitchen for a meal prep side hustle she'd seen on TikTok. Pauline said her kitchen wasn't a cafeteria. It escalated from there. "This is your fault," Brenda shouted during their last fight. "You ran her off. You drove away the one person who kept this family running, and now everything's falling apart, and you sit in your chair acting like you're still in charge of something." Pauline's response, according to the neighbor, "Don't you dare blame me. I held this family together for 20 years. "You held it together by making everyone scared of you," Brenda said. "And now there's nobody left to scare." Brenda moved out the next day. Packed 2 garbage bags of clothes and went to stay with a friend from her gas station days. The basement room sat empty. Then Uncle Ray had his health scare. A minor cardiac episode at the grocery store. An ambulance took him to the ER. Pauline visited. She sat in the chair next to his bed and tried to talk about the weather. Ray looked at her and said, "You know, Pauline, if you'd been half as nice to that girl as you were to your daycare kids, maybe I'd still have someone to drive me to my appointments." Pauline didn't answer. She drove home, parked in the driveway, and sat in the car for 40 minutes before going inside to a house with one person in it, Frank, in his chair, watching television with the volume up high. The Arts Council Gala was 6 weeks out when Wallace asked me to speak at the opening. We were sitting in his office, a narrow room above a bookshop, walls covered in framed posters from 30 years of events. He poured coffee from a thermos and slid a cup across the desk. The committee would like you to say a few words about what it means to build something new in Asheville. Your story resonates with people, Myra. My story. He didn't know the half of it, and I wasn't going to tell him. But the invitation made something shift in my chest. The same feeling I'd had when Margaret looked at my proofs and said, "Where have you been hiding?" I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. I spent the next 2 weeks designing the gala materials and rehearsing 4 sentences in my bathroom mirror. I'm a designer, not a speaker. The idea of standing in front of 150 people made my palms sweat in a way that Pauline's cookouts never had. At least at the cookout, nobody expected me to talk. Then Jolene called. "Heads up," she said. Her voice had that careful, measured tone she used when she was delivering library fines to people she liked. Someone in Cedar Falls shared the gala invitation on Facebook. I don't know who, but Pauline saw it. My stomach tightened. "How do you know?" Derek called me. He said Pauline's been ranting about it since Tuesday. She keeps saying, "She left us, and now she's getting honored? That's not how this works." Derek told her to let it go. And Pauline said, "No. Someone needs to tell those people who she really is." I stood at my studio window and looked out at the mountains. They were still there. They'd been there long before Pauline Smallwood, and they'd be there long after. "Let her come," I said. And I meant it. Gala day. I got dressed in my studio because it felt right to leave from the place I'd built. A navy dress, simple, well-fitted, the nicest thing I owned. I'd bought it at a consignment shop on Battery Park Avenue for $32. Gwen came by with a small velvet box. Inside was a silver brooch shaped like a dogwood blossom. "It was my grandmother's," she said. "She wore it to every event that mattered. I want you to wear it tonight." I pinned it to my dress and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who'd sat at the end of Pauline's table with mustard on her fingers. Same face, different posture, different eyes. The venue was a restored ballroom at the Grand Bohemian Hotel on Biltmore Avenue. High ceilings, exposed brick, warm lighting that made everything look like a painting. 150 guests, artists, business owners, city council members, gallery directors, people who made things and people who funded the making. My work was everywhere. The invitation design on easels at the entrance, the programs fanned across cocktail tables, the welcome banner above the stage in the typography I'd spent 3 weeks refining. My name in the program, Visual Identity by Harper Creative, Myra Harper. I touched the brooch on my dress, took a breath. Meanwhile, and I'd learned this later from Jolene, who'd heard it from Derek, Pauline Smallwood was on Interstate 40, heading east toward Asheville. Derek was driving. He hadn't wanted to come. Pauline had stood at the front door with her purse and her Sunday church dress and said, "She is not going to stand in front of a room full of strangers and play the victim. Drive." Derek said, "Mom, this is a bad idea." Pauline said, "Drive." Brenda had texted Derek that afternoon. "Leave me out of this." Smart girl. First smart thing she'd done in a while. A year ago, I was standing in Pauline's backyard with mustard on my fingers, listening to a table full of people laugh at the idea of me disappearing. Now I'm standing in a ballroom with my name on every wall, and the woman who said nobody would miss me just drove 3 hours to find me. Funny how that works. Stay with me, because what happened next is the reason I'm telling you this story. The gala opened at 7. I stood near the entrance and greeted people I'd worked with. Margaret in a green wrap dress, the coffee roaster in a blazer he clearly didn't wear often, the pottery studio owner with clay still under her fingernails. Gwen circulated with a glass of wine and a camera, taking photos of the signage and the guests and the programs like a proud parent at a school play. Wallace stepped to the microphone at 7:30. The room quieted. "Good evening. Thank you all for being here to celebrate the arts in our community." He spoke for a few minutes about the council's mission, the grants they'd funded, the artists they'd supported. Then he said, Our visual identity this year was created by someone who moved to Asheville less than a year ago and has already become a vital part of our creative community. Her work is everywhere you look tonight. And if you haven't noticed it, that's because it's so well done it feels like it's always been here. Please welcome Myra Harper of Harper Creative. The applause was warm and immediate. I walked to the microphone on legs that felt like they belonged to someone more confident. I kept it short. A year ago, someone told me I was forgettable, that if I disappeared, nobody would notice. I took that as an invitation. A few people laughed. The good kind of laugh. The kind that says they're with you. I disappeared, and I built this. Not because I needed to prove them wrong, but because I needed to prove myself right. Thank you, Asheville, for being the place where I was allowed to exist out loud. The applause was louder this time. Gwen whooped from the back of the room. Margaret dabbed her eyes with a cocktail napkin. I stepped back from the microphone and exhaled. Then I saw them. At the back of the ballroom, near the double doors. Pauline in her Sunday dress. Derek in a wrinkled button-down, standing very still, looking directly at me. Pauline scanned the room the way a general surveys a battlefield. Her eyes moved from the welcome banner to the easels to the programs on the cocktail tables to the guests in their evening clothes. She looked at the signage, my clean lines, my warm colors, my name in the bottom corner of every piece, and her jaw tightened. This wasn't what she'd come for. She'd expected to find me struggling, running a copy shop, living in a rented room. She'd expected to find the version of me she'd constructed in her head. Fragile, desperate, waiting to be rescued from her own bad decision. Instead, she found a ballroom. 150 people, a standing ovation, my name on the walls. She started walking toward me. Derek reached for her arm. Mom, don't. She pulled free without looking at him. I excused myself from the conversation I was having with a gallery owner about a potential commission. I watched Pauline cross the room. The crowd didn't part for her. They simply didn't notice her. She was nobody here. She reached me near the cocktail bar. The bartender was pouring someone a glass of wine. The room was still buzzing with post-speech energy. Nobody was paying attention to us yet. You think you can just walk away from my family? Pauline said, her voice low and controlled, and become some kind of celebrity? I kept my voice at the same level. I didn't walk away from your family, Pauline. I walked away from the way your family treated me. We treated you like family. You told me nobody would miss me at your own dinner table, in front of 23 people. Her lips pressed together. A woman at the next table glanced over, then another. The air around us was starting to change. Pauline's voice went up, not gradually, like a switch being thrown. It was a joke, she said, loud enough to cut through the nearest conversations. Everybody laughed. You couldn't take a joke, and now you've ruined my son's life. Heads turned. The murmur died outward from where we stood like a stone dropped in still water. 150 people in a restored ballroom, and every one of them was looking at the woman in the Sunday church dress, who was shouting at the designer whose name was on their programs. Your son is an adult, I said. Level. Even. The same voice I used on client calls when a revision wasn't working. His life is his responsibility. You left him. Pauline's voice cracked. You broke up this family. Everything was fine before you decided you were too good for us. Everything was fine for you, Pauline, not for me. She stepped forward. Her finger came up, pointing at my chest. You, ungrateful, after everything Her voice broke. Not from rage anymore, but from something underneath it. Something that looked, for a fraction of a second, like the face of a woman who'd spent 20 years holding a family together and couldn't understand why it was falling apart without the daughter-in-law she'd chased away. Then Wallace was there, calm, firm. His hand gently raised between us. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. This is a private event. Pauline turned on him. Don't you tell me what to do. This woman abandoned my family. She left my son. Ma'am. Wallace didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The room was perfectly silent. Every person I'd met that year, every client, every neighbor, every friend, was watching a screaming woman and a quiet designer standing 3 feet apart. I kept my voice low. Pauline, you said something at your cookout a year ago. You said, if you vanished tomorrow, nobody would even miss you. Do you remember that? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I vanished. And you drove 3 hours to find me, walked into a room full of people who know my name, and started screaming. I paused. Looks like somebody missed me after all. The silence held. Then someone near the front clapped. Slow, deliberate. Another joined. A steady ripple of applause spread through the ballroom. Pauline looked around at the faces, sympathetic, appalled, pitying, and for the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. The matriarch, the controller, standing in a room of strangers who saw her clearly, a woman who'd driven 3 hours to tear down the person who'd just thanked a city for letting her exist. And the sticky note you left in my mother's box, I said. You never deserved these? I kept it. Not because it hurts anymore, because it reminds me exactly who I was living with. Her chin trembled. I don't know what You do. Quiet. Final. She turned and walked toward the doors. Derek held one open. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded in that silent room like a period at the end of a very long sentence. I stepped outside 20 minutes later. Derek was leaning against Pauline's sedan, engine running. Pauline sat in the passenger seat, head down. I should have stopped her, he said. Not tonight. From the beginning. Every cookout, every joke, every time she called you a guest and I said nothing. Why didn't you? He dropped his hands. Because I was scared of being the one she turned on next. His voice cracked, and for one moment I saw the 14-year-old boy whose father came home in a wheelchair and whose mother became a fortress. He'd learned early that the fortress kept you safe, as long as you never challenged the builder. That's not an excuse, he said. No, I agreed. It's not. Take care of yourself, Derek. I walked back toward the ballroom. The engine revved behind me, tires on gravel, then silence. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. I signed it, Myra Harper, my mother's name. Jolene's final update from Cedar Falls. Pauline hadn't hosted a cookout since the gala. The grill sat under a blue tarp, collecting rust. Derek had sold Smallwood Auto and taken a mechanic's job at a Meineke in Knoxville. Hourly wage, no signage with his name. Brenda had enrolled in an online bookkeeping course. Jolene said she seemed steadier. Uncle Ray had moved into a senior living community outside Murfreesboro. Regular meals, a card game on Thursdays. People who talked to him because they wanted to. The Smallwood name used to mean cookouts and folding chairs and Pauline's kitchen. The person who'd made it mean something was the one they'd told to disappear. Saturday afternoon, late March. I grilled hot dogs on my rooftop patio. Gwen brought buns, Margaret brought coleslaw. I made my grandmother's potato salad, the one Pauline used to claim as hers. Paper plates, wildflowers from the community garden, no green lawn chair, no queen receiving subjects. We ate. We laughed. Nobody took credit for someone else's work. I picked up a hot dog. Yellow mustard. Pickle relish. Took a slow bite. Looked at the Blue Ridge Mountains going orange in the evening light. Same food. Different table. Same woman. Different life. The people who tell you you're forgettable are always the ones who can't function once you're gone. A sticky note that said, "You never deserved these." A hot dog at a table where I did all the cooking. A mother-in-law who drove 3 hours just to scream at the woman she told to disappear. Sometimes the quietest exit leaves the loudest echo. If this story reminded you of your own table, share it. Comment what you would have said. Subscribe to Calm Drama Stories. I'll see you in the next one.